To write the slope-intercept equation of a line, this sounds kind of silly to say, but if you stop and think about the name, you ultimately need the slope. And when you're looking at y equals mx plus b, which is the slope-intercept equation, slope is the m. M is for mountains, and mountains have slopes. And you also need the y-intercept. Now the y-intercept is the constant b. We have called these other things in the previous unit. The y-intercept was our start value. That's the point that was on the y-axis. And the slope was our rise over run, or our rate of change. So we're just looking at these with different names. So if it wants me to write the slope-intercept equation of a line, what I already know how to do is to find the slope. So if I have 2 points, I would recommend stacking one point above the other, just so that my x's are lined up and y's are lined up, and it's easier to see what goes together. Now I'm going to remind myself that m is slope and it's rise over run. The reason I do this is, as I said before, I know that my y's rise inside the ordered pair, x comes before y, it's alphabetical order. So I want to find the change in y, so negative 2 minus 6, over the change in x, 8 minus a negative 4. Well, negative 2 minus 6 is a negative 8. 8 minus a negative 4 is like 8 plus a positive 4, so 12. So my slope, reducing this fraction, is negative 2/3. I would highly encourage you to immediately go and start writing your final answer. I know now that my line is going to be y equals negative 2/3. Notice that horizontal as much as I could get it on here, fraction bar, with the x out to the side of the fraction bar. The problem is I don't know the y-intercept. If I knew that it crossed the y-axis at positive 5, I could write plus 5 here. Or negative 4, I could write minus 4 here. Since I don't know that, I'm going to go back to my y equals mx plus b equation. Now I know the slope, which I just calculated, is negative 2/3. The thing I'm trying to find is b, the y-intercept. In each of these points, though, I have an x and a y value that work in that particular point. So I'm going to take one of my points, in this case the point 8, negative 2. It doesn't matter which point, I'll get the same answer. And I'm going to substitute negative 2 for my y, because y is negative 2, and I'm going to substitute 8 for my x. So negative 2 equals, well, negative 2/3 times 8 is negative 16/3, which is negative 5 1/3. Now, bring down my plus b. At this point, I have this equation. Negative 2 equals negative 5 1/3 plus b. I want to solve for b, so I'm going to add 5 1/3 to eliminate that negative 5 1/3. And the addition property equality says if I do this to one side, I need to do it to the other side of the equation. So negative 2 plus 5 1/3 is 3 1/3 equals, double checking, yep, this is 0, so all that's left over there is b. So negative 2/3 x plus 3 1/3. Now, to make sure that I did this right, I would go to my calculator and take the other point that I didn't just use, negative 4 positive 6. If y is 6, is it true that I can take negative 2/3 times 4 and add 3 1/3 and get an answer of 6? So in my calculator, I'd take negative 2/3 times 4. Well, that's negative 8/3, which is negative 4. See, I did the wrong thing. That's positive 8/3. 8/3 is 2 2/3. I add 3 1/3 to 2 2/3, and I do get positive 6. So this line, this equation, should work for both of my points. If it does, it's the equation of the line that goes through those points. Now, with slope, I wanted you to leave this 3 1/3 as a 10/3, as a reduced improper fraction. That's because then you can still see the rise 10 over the run 3. But for the y-intercept, it makes more sense to say this crosses the y-axis at positive 3 1/3. So in this case, I changed it to the mixed number. So first, I'm going to find the slope, reminding myself it's rise over run. I'm going to stack one point above the other point. It doesn't matter which point goes on top. And then I'm going to identify the x and the y that I'm going to use in the second part when I go to find my y-intercept. So the rise is the change in my y's, so 5 minus -3. The run is the change in my x's, -4 minus -8. 5 minus -3 is +8. -4 minus -8 is -4 plus 8, which is +4. So my slope is 2. I already know that my final equation is going to be a y equals 2x and then something behind it. Well, y is 5. The slope that I just found is 2. When y is 5, x is -4. And the thing I'm trying to find is my y-intercept. So 5 equals -8 plus b. I would add 8 to eliminate that -8 and add 8 to the other side of the equation. So 13 equals b. Since it's a positive 13, I'm going to write plus 13. If it was a negative 13, I would write minus 13 as my answer. Don't give a final answer with plus and negative. And then I'm going to check this with my second point. So 2 times -8 is -16. -16 plus 13 is -3. Yep, y is -3, so it works. Now, for C, again, find my slope. M equals rise over run. Doesn't matter which point I put on top of the other. I'm just kind of alternating just because it doesn't matter. And I'll identify my x and y I'm going to use over here when I'm finding B. So rise is the change in y, so 11 minus -3. Over the change in x is my run, -2 minus 5, which becomes +14 divided by -7. So my slope is -2. I'm immediately going to start writing my answer. And it shouldn't be m equals y equals -2x. Now I need to go find my y-intercept. So using 11 for my y, my slope is -2. When y is 11, x is -2. And I'm trying to find my y-intercept. So 11 equals +4 plus b. To eliminate this +4, I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides of the equation. So 7 equals b. Since it's a +7 again, I write a +7. If it was a -7, I would write -7. Double check by posting the other pair in there. -2 times +5, so -2 times +5 is -10, plus 7 is -3. Yes, my y is -3. Now, in this last equation, when I stack one point above the other point, -11, +4, I immediately notice that, hey, both of my y's are 4. My equations are just saying what each of these points have in common. Now this one's more complex. What each of these points have in common is if I take -2 times the x value and add 7, I get the y value. The one that was even more complex is the first one. If I take -2/3 times the x value and I add 3 1/3 to it, then I get the y value. In this case, what these have in common, y is 4. So if my equation's just describing what these have in common, y equals 4 is the equation of my line. Now, I could go through and do all the work to get there. If I calculated the slope, I would get a slope of 0. I'm not going to show that calculation, but I would have found the slope is 0. And then I would have gone through and said, well, y equals mx plus b. With the slope being 0, let's use this second point. 4 equals 0 times -11 plus b. So 4 equals 0 plus b, and 0 plus b is just b. So b equals 4. What you would not do is write a final answer of y equals 0x plus 4 because it's not simplified. 0 times x is just 0, and then you add the 4, so y equals 4. But if we noticed this in the first place, that both the y's were +4, we can write that equation, and we're done with the problem right away. Thank you.